Welcome, dear brothers and sisters. This is Pastor Mark back with you for another book overview as a part of Reading Through the Bible 2021. Can you believe it? We are going into the book of Isaiah. Oh yeah, I got to take off my shades. Sorry, as I've been reading the Bible, the truths have been so bright. We are endeavoring into the book of Isaiah now, a long book, like 60 plus chapters. We'll be in it for a couple of months, and I'm looking forward to going through it with you, dear friends. As you probably suspect, Isaiah is written by its namesake, the prophet Isaiah, in the 8th century BC. That's the years of the 700s. It's a hard thing in the AD, but even harder in the BC to remember that it's less than the number of the century number that you're saying. Isaiah's name means the Lord saves, and indeed salvation is a major theme of the book of Isaiah. Isaiah was a contemporary of a few other biblical prophets. He lived and ministered during the other prophets Isaiah, Hosea, and Micah. So sometimes if you look at the things Isaiah is talking about in current events, you can find similarly things mentioned in those other three, Amos, Hosea, and Micah. Isaiah also ministered during the time of 4 kings. Most notably, King Hezekiah, who was a rare good king for Israel. You may remember it was a long, gradual downhill slide. There was a brief uptick for Hezekiah, some hope, but then it kept on going bad after that, unfortunately. So Isaiah did write during a period of Israel's decline, and it has significant judgment passages about Israel. Not only Israel, though, also the countries surrounding Israel. Assyria to the north was a major power and a growing power and a significant source of worry and concern for Israel. And so of the surrounding countries, I believe Assyria is talked about the most. But the prophet Isaiah condemns Israel's sinfulness, its injustice that was going on socially at the time. Israel was clinging to idols. It was making political alliances with the surrounding nations. And essentially, part of Isaiah's major message is you have misplaced your trust. It needs to be put in God and in obedience and in justice. So, not injustice, but it needs to be placed in justice. Isaiah also prophesied the Babylonian captivity, but also their liberation several decades later. Beyond difficult passages, there are some beautiful, comforting, and glorious chapters, though admittedly those are a minority in there. But they are beautiful, and they really, you appreciate them all the more after reading the condemnatory passages. So Isaiah is mainly a prophecy book, but it has some narrative and some poetry in there also. It's the time of his writing covers a long stretch. He talks about contemporary, current day stuff. He also talks about eschatology, like time of the end and God's judgment, and then all the way to the new earth. So things that are long in our past and also in our pretty close future and also in the distant future. Isaiah also has many of the clearest prophecies of Jesus. Chapter 53 is a famous messianic chapter, but it's not the only one. We'll find other significant chapters as well as we go through. And also, as I mentioned, significant passages of life in the new earth. Thankfully, there's one toward the beginning in chapter 11 that we'll see pretty soon, and then one way at the end in chapter 66. Isaiah also employed a prolific vocabulary. He uses a broader vocab than any other Old Testament author, more than 2,200 unique words used in the book. And he also uses powerful imagery. He frequently goes to themes like vineyards representing Israel, and a rock representing God, and fire of destruction in the last days. And he also does a lot of personification of the non-living elements, things like the sun and the moon and the deserts and the mountains and the forests. So major themes that are in the book of Isaiah are judgment and destruction. Isaiah also emphasizes God's holiness repeatedly. He really liked the term, the Holy One of Israel. That phrase is going to come up 26 times, and there's only 6 other instances of that in the whole rest of the Bible. He also emphasized God's sovereignty, shouldn't be surprised, and also major social justice themes. You want to be right with God? Pursue justice for the minority, for the oppressed. A couple of passages that are particular for Seventh-day Adventists. There's significant emphasis on the Sabbath, even in forward-looking, like new heavens and new earth times. Chapter 58 and 66 are both pretty famous for having significant sections on the Sabbath. And Isaiah looms large in the New Testament. He's quoted multiple times in the New Testament by different New Testament authors. A couple more personal things about Isaiah. There is a passage on his own prophetic calling. He didn't feel worthy to be called at the beginning. And to me that seems very authentic, because I think an authentic-minded person views that they are unworthy for such a task. But praise the Lord, we'll see in, I think it's chapter 5 or 6, that God does something that makes Isaiah worthy. So praise the Lord. He was also married. He had at least 2 sons, and those sons' names had prophetic significance. We'll see that toward the beginning of the book. I think like chapters 7 and 8 is where his sons are mentioned. Jewish tradition states that Isaiah came to the end of his life by being sawed in half by the wicked king Manasseh. Now that is not directly stated in the Bible. However, in Hebrews chapter 11, there's a whole list that's called like the heroes of faith. And toward the end, when it gives like a laundry list of all the things the righteous people of the Old Testament had to submit to and had to put up with, it does talk about righteous people being sawn in two. That is a likely reference to Isaiah, because there's no other prophet in the Old Testament who's referred to as being sawn in two. So that is probably your biblical support for Isaiah being sawn in two there toward the end of Hebrews 11. We'll actually be there in just a couple of days as we read through the Bible. God bless you all, dear friends, and pray that this will be a fruitful journey for us. As we continue through different books of the Bible, we'll continue through Psalms and Numbers and Deuteronomy while we're going through Isaiah, and also finishing off the smaller books of the New Testament. So, looking forward to diving in with you, dear friends, in the coming days. Pray that things are well with you and your household. May God bless you going forward. Bye-bye.